Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on an industry that just captivates millions, the world of video games. We all see the dazzling launches, right? The groundbreaking titles, these incredible immersive worlds we get to explore. But what about the less seen side? The intense pressures, the studio struggles, the actual human stories behind the pixels. This deep dive is all about revealing that often hidden reality.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're leaning heavily on Jason Schreier's meticulously researched book, Press Reset. It really takes us behind the pixels, beyond the glitches. It uncovers the rise and fall of some really celebrated studios and the emotional and professional toll this takes on countless developers. Our goal today is to try and understand that delicate balance, between creative ambition, commercial success, and just the profound instability in this huge, booming, but volatile industry.
Right. And our mission for you listening in is to extract the most important nuggets, the key insights from Press Reset. Think of it as a shortcut to getting really informed about these struggles, but also the remarkable resilience you find in game development. So yeah, let's just jump straight into these stories. Okay, picture this. A game development legend, someone famous for creating these really immersive worlds, complex moral choices. And he dreams of crafting a Disney epic. That was Warren Spector, a true pioneer, known for his groundbreaking work on Deus Ex. Press Reset details his path to create Epic Mickey, which was this fascinating blend of his signature style and, those iconic Disney characters. Initially, Spector was incredibly excited, obviously, but that excitement, it soured pretty quickly. Disney executives, it turns out, were, more focused on the mobile gaming market that was just starting to boom. They seemed kind of disengaged from his console vision, and Spector, he'd actually sought creative freedom by starting his own studio, Junction Point, specifically after leaving Electronic Arts because of those corporate pressures. But even with a successful game like Epic Mickey under his belt, his studio eventually faced closure. Epic Mickey 2 had kind of mediocre sales, and Disney made a strategic shift away from console titles. It really brings home a tough reality about the creative sector, doesn't it? Spector's story, it reveals this crucial paradox. Even a legend pursuing creative freedom can end up right back facing the same corporate pressures. It kind of proves that vision alone can't always insulate you against market forces.
It really makes you wonder then if true creative autonomy is fully attainable in an industry driven by such massive commercial interests? Or is it always this ongoing negotiation? Spector's experience, it just perfectly encapsulates that broader, relentless challenge, balancing artistic vision with commercial viability. Large corporations, by their very nature, they often prioritize immediate profit over pure creativity. And that inevitably leads to tension, right? And significant constraints on developers. It just underscores how absolutely vital resilience becomes when you're facing those kinds of corporate-driven setbacks.
Yeah, resilience is key. Spectre struggles really highlight that clash between individual vision and corporate realities. But what happens when that vision is the corporation, or at least very closely tied to it? Let's turn to another celebrated studio, Irrational Games, the creators of the iconic BioShock. The book recounts how BioShock back in 2007 just shattered any lingering doubts about video games as a legitimate art form. Really, it proved their narrative potential with deep philosophical themes and that, unforgettable dystopian world. Like the book says, plain and simple, BioShock proved that video games could be art. Yeah, absolutely. Yet, despite this huge success, the development atmosphere under Ken Levine, Irrational's co-founder, was incredibly intense. It was marked by really high demands, significant staff turnover, and just widespread burnout. Developers endured extensive crunch periods, which, means mandatory overtime, often for months, under intense pressure. And the development of its sequel, BioShock Infinite, that was even more fraught, just characterized by endless iterations and changes, designers abandoning concepts they'd already developed again and again. But here's the twist. Despite BioShock Infinite's critical and commercial success, Levine announced Irrational Games' closure in 2014. He chose to pursue a smaller studio instead. That decision left, so many employees just shocked, scrambling for new opportunities.
That narrative, it really raises an important question about the complexities and the pressures within game development, especially when projects hinge so heavily on the vision of one single creative leader. While an auteur's presence can definitely inspire groundbreaking work like BioShock, it can also create significant risks to team dynamics, overall stability, just like we saw with Irrational Games, the volatility of game development careers, as Schreier points out. can have really devastating consequences when it's tied so closely to one person's highly intense, maybe even perfectionist, creative direction.
Okay, so from the weight of individual creative vision, let's shift focus a bit. Let's look at the corporate response, which can be less than transparent when studios close their doors. Press Reset details the unexpected shutdown of 2K Marin in October 2013. That was a subsidiary of 2K. They developed BioShock 2. What's really striking is how 2K's PR described the layoffs. They called it a realignment of resources. As one employee quoted in the book put it, they've never said it's a closure. They said it was a realignment of resources. I mean, that vague language, it caused immense frustration among the laid-off staff. They felt their studio never got proper closure, and it certainly stunted public sympathy and support. Yeah, that wording is something.
And the book outlines 2K Marin's challenging journey, too, from developing BioShock 2, which was always going to be a difficult follow-up, right, to the ill-fated XCOM reboot project where, according to the sources, cultural identities blurred and morale diminished. It sounds like a tough time. The studio was eventually shut down after the Bureau. XCOM Declassified performed poorly, and that was a project they hadn't even initially chosen to make.
Right. And that corporate language surrounding 2K Marin's shutdown, it reveals a fundamental disconnect, I think. This pressure to align resources, it often falls heaviest on the developers themselves. We see it again and again. Zooming out, you see how these euphemisms can make employees feel betrayed, undervalued. It hinders their emotional recovery, fosters disillusionment, not just for those laid off, but for the remaining staff who see it happen. And it's often a direct consequence of that constant pressure on studios to replicate past success. It pushes companies to make tough decisions, often without clear communication.
Exactly. And that pressure to align resources often falls heaviest on the developers themselves, like you said. We see it vividly with Zach Mumbach at Visceral Games. Press Reset paints Mumbach as this self-proclaimed workaholic who, almost by chance, stumbled into game development at EA. Started as a QA tester back in 2000, Mumbach really dedicated himself, climbed the ranks, became a producer at Visceral Games, the studio known for the brilliant, critically acclaimed Dead Space. However, as the industry evolved, EA's corporate structure imposed these really strict expectations for profit growth. They pushed Visceral for more multiplayer elements, broader appeal, kind of steering them away from their unique single-player horror experiences. And despite Visceral's creative successes like Dead Space 2, the studio was shut down in 2017. The official reasons: financial underperformance and cost-cutting measures over creative aspirations. Wumbach's reflection in the book just captured the sentiment perfectly. I'm tired of working 80-hour weeks so that people like Patrick Sirlin can get a new car. Wow, that's not just about corporate greed, is it?
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that in this high-stakes industry, creative passion is often, commodified. Developers feel their extraordinary efforts just serve profit margins, not necessarily groundbreaking art.
Moonbox experiences really highlight that inherent conflict. Creativity versus profit-driven decisions. Corporate demands, they can often stifle true innovation, forcing studios to pivot towards more commercially safe projects. Maybe projects with microtransactions or live service elements. It raises that important question about the industry's prioritization. Profit over artistic integrity. So while Moonbox's perspective is completely valid and shared by many, we also have to acknowledge the financial realities. Studios and publishers operate in a brutally competitive market. The next big hit isn't just desirable, it's often essential for survival.
So what does all this mean for the passionate people actually making these games? Especially when a grand vision meets these harsh financial realities. Let's delve into the ambitious, but ultimately tragic tale of 38 Studios. Founded by the former MLB player Curt Schilling, Press Reset paints this picture of a studio with almost luxurious perks, an environment designed to attract top talent. We're talking generous health benefits, high-end equipment, free meals, lavish travel. Schilling's philosophy, quoted in the book, was, he said, "That's how I want my team to feel. I'm going to attract the best, and I'm going to treat them as if they're the best." But Schilling, despite having, as the book says, no industry experience, harbored this massive ambition and create a World of Warcraft rivaling MMORPG, codenamed Copernicus. Huge undertaking. However, the studio quickly faced early financial struggle. They were relying heavily on Schilling's personal fortune. To try and diversify, generate some revenue, 38 Studios acquired another developer, Big Huge Games. They tasked them with creating a single-player title, Kingdoms of Amalur, reckoning basically to prop up the development of the ambitious MMORPG.
Yeah, and a critical point emerges when you look at Schilling's story, doesn't it? While passion and charisma, they can definitely motivate and inspire teams, no doubt. But they can also lead to overconfidence, maybe even reckless decision-making if they're not tempered with practical business acumen. Like actual experience running a company this complex. This narrative really underscores the importance of building a strong financial foundation right from the start and being able to adapt to market conditions. You can't just rely on a grand vision without sufficient industry experience or, frankly, proper oversight. It's a powerful lesson, maybe a cautionary tale, about grounding grand dreams in solid business realities.
Absolutely. And the story for Big Huge Games, the studio acquired by 38 Studios, it takes an even more abrupt, painful turn. Picture this. May 15th, 2012, Big Huge Games had planned a Diablo research day. They were going to play Diablo 3 on launch day. But the excitement quickly turned to dread. Employees realized they hadn't received their paychecks. As one employee, Joe Quadara, recounted, I woke up and first thing I do is check my direct deposit, Quadara said. I don't see anything there. I'm like, oh shit, here we go. Just imagine that feeling. This terrifying realization led to immediate layoffs because 38 studios declared bankruptcy just over a week later. And despite Kingdoms of Amalur, Reckoning being pretty well received, praised for its combat, people hoped for a sequel. 38 studios' catastrophic financial implosion led to its total collapse. It's just a brutal cycle for these talented people. Many former Big Huge Games employees, including Ian Fraser, they moved on to Epic Games, formed a new team called Impossible Studios, only to face another closure due to corporate decisions there later on. It's relentless sometimes.
It really is. But zooming out from these individual heartbreaks, it's clear that past failures, though devastating, they can offer invaluable learning experiences. They forge resilience in people. Many developers from these closures, like those from Big Huge Games, they leverage their talent, their networks, their shared experience to find new opportunities. It truly highlights the significance of community, doesn't it? And those shared experiences in helping individuals navigate and hopefully overcome these really tough times in the industry. It shows that talent often finds a way to regroup, to rebuild.
So, after all these abrupt endings, these cycles of boom and bust, what about that resilience, the resilience of the developers themselves? Press Reset shifts focus here, looking at the emergence of indie studios as a kind of counter-narrative. It starts with the story of Mythic Entertainment. Now, Mythic had a long history, successful MMORPGs like Dark Age of Camelot, but after EA acquired them, they struggled as the genre's popularity waned a bit. So Mythic pivoted. They moved into mobile gaming, and that resulted in the, let's say, controversial reboot of Dungeon Keeper. This mobile version had a business model that relied very heavily on microtransactions and timers. Lots of timers. Yeah, remember the reaction to that one. This approach, it ignited serious internal conflict. Press Reset details the disdain from the development team over what they saw as unethical practices. Developers felt really conflicted. One noted, we felt bad charging for that, and so we said, okay, we'll put it out for free, implying they felt forced into the timer model. Another spoke to the pressure. When you have this mandate that there have to be a bunch of timers in the game, it's hard to say, well, the timers suck. This led to, severe backlash from fans and critics, and ultimately it contributed to Mythic's closure.
The Dungeon Keeper reboot, it really illustrates the immense challenges of balancing creative integrity with, well, business demands, especially certain kinds of mobile gaming business demands. It kind of encourages us as players and observers to critically evaluate business models that prioritize short-term profit, perhaps aggressively, over the actual player experience. Because that approach, as the story reveals, can profoundly impact developer morale, completely alienate the fan base, and, ultimately contribute to a studio's downfall. It's a powerful lesson in the potential long-term cost of compromising your core creative principles, or maybe your relationship with your audience.
But the narrative doesn't just end with corporate shutdowns and compromised visions. Press Reset also beautifully illustrates an alternative path. It tells the stories of developers who found renewed purpose and, importantly, freedom in independent development. Take Gwen Frey. After experiencing multiple studio shutdowns, she felt she was on this treadmill that will never end without actual ownership of her creations. Her desire was so clear, I just want to make something that's mine. And she eventually left, founded her own studio, and created her own critically acclaimed puzzle game, Kine. And then there's Forrest Dowling and Scott Sinclair. After Irrational's closure, they founded the Molasses Flood. They successfully funded their game, The Flame in the Flood, via Kickstarter. Real grassroots effort. And even former Mythic employees like Dave Crooks and Brent Sogman, they went on to form Dodgerel Games. They developed the incredibly successful indie roguelike Enter the Gungeon, which is, a challenging genre known for its procedural generation and permadeath, a project that just stands in stark contrast to their previous corporate experience. These are just powerful testaments to individual grit, creative drive, and the pursuit of a different kind of success, maybe a more sustainable one.
Absolutely. These stories truly emphasize the importance of adapting to market changes. adapting to personal circumstances. And they highlight the remarkable potential for innovation and, yes, success in independent development. They demonstrate how developers, when empowered, actively seek creative freedom, personal fulfillment, and just better work satisfaction outside the often constrictive constraints of large corporate structures. It's a significant shift in mindset, isn't it? And career path, driven by that deep desire for ownership and control over their artistic output and maybe their own time.
Which brings us back really to the overarching theme of press reset, the undeniable human cost of this high-stakes industry. Joe Falstick's experience is particularly telling. It's characterized by multiple layoffs, the relentless pressures of chronic overtime, the crunch, which, as he describes, negatively affected his personal life profoundly. Eventually, he just left gaming altogether, moved to the software industry where he found, better work-life balance. As one developer starkly put it in the book describing the industry, it treats people poorly. It chews them up and then spits them back out, leaving nothing but gristle and bones behind. Oof!
Yeah, that's a heavy quote. It really urges listeners, I think, to consider the profound importance of work-life balance and the desperate need for more supportive work environments that actually prioritize the well-being of their creative talent. Joe Falstick's story, and others like it, really highlight the detrimental effects of workaholism, of certain corporate cultures, on personal life, and the industry's tendency sometimes to exploit people's passion for profit. It forces us to ask that hard question. At what human cost does all this amazing innovation come?
But Press Reset isn't just about diagnosing the problems. It also explores potential human solutions, ways forward. One really fascinating example is Steve Elmore and his team from the closed Irrational Games. They formed Disbelief, but not as a new game studio. They set up as an outsourcing tech company, focusing specifically on technical outsourcing for other studios. This model, as the book explains, it reduces the risk of layoffs and company closures because these expert teams work on contract. It mitigates some of that volatility inherent in traditional game development. Elmore's quote, "I'm not worried about what's happening tomorrow anymore." I mean, that speaks volumes about the stability this kind of model can potentially offer. And the book also touches on other potential solutions, things like allowing more remote work, which obviously became a huge necessity during the pandemic but might stick around, and advocating for unionization, giving workers a stronger collective voice to protect their rights against some of these systemic issues we've talked about, like crunch and instability. These aren't just minor tweaks, are they? They represent potentially fundamental shifts in how the industry could operate.
Exactly. This discussion around solutions, it represents really critical thinking about how to, well, change the game dramatically, to use the book's phrasing. Models like specialized outsourcing, like Disbelief and more flexible remote work options, they offer tangible advantages. They could provide more stability, maybe a better work-life balance for developers, directly addressing some of these core issues. And furthermore, the idea of collective action, like unionization, it presents a potentially powerful way to empower developers, to address those industry-wide issues, the ones individual studios often struggle or maybe lack the incentive to tackle alone. It's about moving towards a more equitable, more sustainable future for all this creative talent.
And there you have it. A journey through the volatility, the resilience, and the deeply human stories of the video game industry, all drawn from the pages of Jason Schreier's Press Reset. It's an industry that exhilarates and inspires millions of us, but clearly one that comes with significant challenges for the brilliant minds who actually create its magic.
So we'll leave you with a provocative thought, one that really embodies the spirit of Schreier's book and his call to action. Change the game dramatically. Band together with your colleagues to crack it open, fix the glitches, and tear out all the unfair parts.
So thinking about all this, what changes do you think are most vital for the future of creative industries like gaming? How can we ensure that passion can thrive without coming at such a steep, often hidden human cost? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.